Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about 5 drinks that can help remove fat from your liver, and I want to start from a really fundamental place because if you do not understand what your liver actually does, it makes it really hard to understand why any of this matters. First of all, what is your liver? Your liver is an organ in your body, and it is honestly one of the largest organs in your body, and it actually plays an absolutely critical role to detoxify your body, but it does it through your blood. So here is how the whole system works. Your blood sends a huge volume of fluid into your liver. Your liver actually filters that fluid, and the cells within your liver basically clean your blood, remove the toxins from it, and then send it back on its way to actually go pick up more oxygen and more nutrients, so it can be pumped out to all the rest of your body. Now here is something quite interesting. The liver actually has some fat in it naturally, and it can hold on to fat. So when you actually have more fat than the rest of your body can comfortably store, it winds up actually being sent over to the liver. So think about the liver as kind of a storage area for extra fat. You can just build up fat there until your body actually needs that fuel, which comes in the form of fat, and then burns it right down. Alright, so we are going to come into this even more deeply in just a moment, but your liver's basically main function is to cleanse and detoxify your body. So what is the real connection between body fat and liver fat? I want to walk you through exactly what happens when you eat a meal and how your liver plays a role when it comes to that fat. So when you actually eat food, alright, whatever it is, even healthy foods, you are eating your food, you are chewing it up, it is going down into your system, you are digesting it, your metabolism is firing up, and your body is actually hardwired to take the energy from the food that you have eaten and store it in your muscles. Use it right away in the blood, and then anything extra can be stored into body fat, and the body fat can store it anywhere. It can store it under your skin, which we call subcutaneous fat. It can also store it deep into the center of your body. Okay, so think about your body in cross-section. It is basically a tube, and there is fat that lives inside that tube. We call that visceral fat. A little bit of visceral fat is normal. It is just a storage area, but a lot of visceral fat is genuinely quite dangerous, and here is something that genuinely surprises most people when they hear it for the first time. It does not matter how big you are on the outside. You could be really thin and have a skinny tube of your body, but that tube can actually be packed with fat, and you would never know it from the outside. So then you are active, you are moving around, you are using up the energy, you are burning down the fuel, alright, until it is time to load up again on your next meal. So think of your body like a car. You kind of alternate between going fast, going down the road doing your business, versus pulling into the gas station because you are running low on fuel. You got to fill up again, and filling up is really kind of like eating. When you eat, you store that food into your fuel tank, alright, just like a car at a filling station, and in the case of your body, energy is actually stored in body fat until you burn it right down. Alright, now what happens if you actually start to accumulate fat more and more fat over time? Well, fat is accumulated in cells that we call adipocytes. Alright, these are special fat cells that you are actually born with. In fact, it is one of the very early cell types that forms in your body, and it is critical because adipocytes or fat cells are basically fuel tanks for your body. Now here is the really interesting part. Unlike a fuel tank in a car, which is made out of metal and very rigid, the adipocyte or fat cell is stretchy. It can expand, so you can actually take a fat cell and load it up with fat, and it can stretch up to 3 times its original size, that is 300% larger. And if you do that over and over and over again with the same cell, you can kind of see how your body would start to swell and puff up, and that is actually how fat grows. Now when your body is actually burning fuel because you are exercising or you are just in motion, what happens? The body will draw down that fuel that is stored, and in fact it even does it when you are not in motion. When you are sleeping, your body will start to burn down that fuel as well all through the night. So whenever you are not taking in calories, whenever you are not eating, your body is actually going to switch gears and start to burn down that stored fat. And when you exercise or you are walking around or doing chores, you are going to burn it down even faster. So that is how body fat is built up. That is how it is actually burned down, and that is just part of the natural cycle of life. Now what happens when your body fat storage is actually filled up? So let us say you are eating and overeating. That is actually one of the most common causes of fat accumulating in your liver. You are eating too many calories, way too many calories, and those calories are going into your stomach. They are being absorbed into your bloodstream, and now your body has got to store them, so you store them into body fat. Remember, I told you a single fat cell can swell 3 times its size, and then the next fat cell also needs to get loaded up, and it will swell 3 times in size, and then the third one swells up 3 times in size, and over again, as you are actually loading up on your calories. Alright, with severe overeating, you are way overloading on the fat is building up, and at a certain point you are kind of running out of fat cell capacity. So what your body does is it calls on stem cells inside your fat tissue to actually make brand new fat cells. And when I went to medical school, this is one of the things I was always taught by my professors. We were told that you are born with all the fat cells you are ever going to have, and that turns out to just not be true. We now know with more modern research that in fact your fat tissue can actually generate more of itself. Alright, it does that when it needs to through these stem cells, so energy into your body gets stored in fat. Fat can expand, and then fat will shrink when you are actually burning down that energy. But what happens if you keep on overeating, keep on eating more than you are actually burning down, right? So think of this like a sink, right? A sink in your bathroom, or your sink in your kitchen. You have got a spigot up there, and that is energy coming in, that is like fuel coming in. You have also got a drain that is removing the fluid, and that is actually burning away that energy. Alright, so a couple of things can happen if there is a blockage in the sink and there is no outflow. Guess what? You can just eat regular amounts of food and put regular amounts of water into your sink, but it will still build up, and then overflow, and this is what happens when you have liver failure, and livers can absolutely fail when they are full of fat because they are not functioning properly and they are not able to burn down that fat because there is just so much of it, and so now every time you take in more fat it just keeps on swelling and building up. Alright, now the other thing that you can actually do to overwhelm your sink is if you put the spigot on full blast, alright, and the drain capacity does not change, and then you walk away and now your water level goes up, and same thing in your body, fat and fuel goes up, eventually it is going to spill over, and this is what actually happens with fat cells in your body when you are storing fuel, and you are overeating, some more still overeating. Alright, now your fat cells swell, and eventually there is spillage, just like the sink that you put on wide open, the spigot water flows out of the sink down onto the floor. Alright, that water has to go somewhere. Guess what? When you overeat, and you overwhelm the capacity of your fat tissue to store that fuel, what happens? The energy spills out of the fat into your bloodstream, and now you have actually overflowed the tank. Now in your human body that overflow gets caught by the liver. Remember, I told you the liver's job is to detoxify the blood, so when you have got this spillage of fat, think about it like an oil tanker running aground and spilling all the oil into the ocean. Well, when that actually happens inside your body, you have got fat spilling out everywhere, and your liver basically jumps into action to clean up and detoxify the situation, so it absorbs all that fat and it stores it all up. The liver becomes just another sink, just another storage area for all this extra fat. Your body does not want to lose any of that captured energy, so it will actually store the excess in the liver, and the liver gets filled up with fat. Remember what I told you a moment ago, when you overload the liver with fat it stops functioning properly, and remember what I said about the function of the liver. Its main job is to be a detoxifier in your body, so when you have got too much fat that has overflowed your tanks of fat tissue, and that fat overflows into your liver, and your liver accumulates it, now it knocks out your liver function. The liver cannot detoxify, and that can cause all kinds of problems, right? Because now you are not detoxifying other things as well, and the liver also makes proteins, and so when your liver is not functioning well, it is also not going to make the right kinds of proteins. What kind of proteins? Well, like the proteins you actually need to clot your blood. So when you have liver failure, guess what? Your liver is unable to make the substances that actually help your blood clot, so you become highly vulnerable to bleeding and hemorrhage, which can actually be fatal. Alright, so there are real consequences to overloading your liver and having fatty liver accumulate, and this is exactly why we are having this whole conversation. Alright, here is the thing: fatty liver disease due to overconsumption of calories is now the #1 cause today for the need of liver transplantation, and that is a really dramatic change from when I went to medical school back when we were learning. It was mainly alcoholism. Alcoholics came in needing a liver transplant because their livers were shot, and people with hepatitis also had shot livers. But now in today's world, with the overabundance of food and the overconsumption of calories, now it is actually non-alcoholic fatty liver disease driving that list. And by the way, this non-alcoholic form, because it is not due to alcohol, is happening in younger and younger people. Alright, and that is not a good thing at all. Remember I told you that the liver has to detoxify your body. Alright, now when the liver is actually packed with fat, guess what? It also leaks fat out of itself, and now you actually have lipolysis happening, so now you have got fat floating around in your bloodstream as well, so a fatty liver overflows its own tank, and that is not good at all. So what are some of the symptoms that you might have a fatty liver? Well, if you have it, you probably already know. You feel more tired, you feel more fatigued, you feel a general sense of malaise, you feel just kind of crummy overall, and your liver is located up in the right upper quadrant of your abdomen, so you might actually have some discomfort right there because the liver is kind of swollen and pushing against the surrounding tissues. Now when the liver really shuts down, you can develop cirrhosis, and that is basically liver shutdown with scarring inside the liver from chronic damage, and some of the things that people experience are itchy skin. Because the liver is supposed to pass a large volume of blood in order to detoxify it. If it is not working properly, the fluid backs up, and guess where that fluid goes? It gets deposited into the hollow of your belly. It is called the peritoneal space, and the fluid that builds up there is called ascites. In fact, you can actually shake the belly, and you will hear the fluid sloshing around, and actually sometimes what we have to do in the hospital is to put a needle in there and drain that ascites fluid out, because it is a real problem when you have liver failure, and that fluid does not just back up inside the belly, it can also leak down into your legs. So how many people have you ever seen with really swollen legs and ankles? Well, liver damage is one of the causes of that swelling, called edema, and you can actually press your finger into the swollen part of the leg, and it is kind of like pressing it into bread dough. It will cause a pitting indentation. It will leave a little dent right there. That takes a while to fill back. And remember, I told you that liver failure is also accompanied by problems with your circulation. Well, you can start to develop these little skin marks called spider angiomas, because they look like tiny little blood vessel spiders that are blooming on your skin, and of course, because you are not detoxifying your blood, the toxins back up in your circulation, and guess what? Your skin can start to turn yellowish, and the scare of your eyes, the white of your eyes, can also become yellowish. So as medical doctors like me, when we are examining somebody in the emergency room or the clinic or the intensive care unit, we are actually actively looking for yellowing of the skin and sclera of the eyes as classic signs of liver damage, cirrhosis, and liver failure. Okay, now when you unfortunately get all the way to that end stage where pretty much everything gets shot, guess what? You are going to need help, and that help might just rely on getting a liver transplant. It is hard to get a liver Transplant because there simply are not enough donor livers to go around, but the reason we are having this whole conversation, and the reason that I think it is really critical for me to communicate this issue to you is because the liver before it fails is genuinely quite resilient. The liver can actually regenerate itself, alright, so if you actually unburden the liver by burning down more fat, alright, before you get all the way to the end game, you actually can allow your liver to grow itself back and you can actually be okay again. Here is the remarkable thing about the liver: if you took the liver and you removed 2/3 of it, okay, cut away 2/3 of it, just 1/3 that is left over actually will grow itself back over a period of just a few months. So the liver is highly regenerative, it wants to actually do its job. That is how important it is in your body, alright, it is a highly resilient organ. So if you have got fatty liver and you burn down that excess fat, you are going to unpack the fat out of your liver and allow it to actually regenerate. If you are on your way to a fatty liver, or you want to avoid a fatty liver in the first place, you definitely want to burn that fat away, alright, and that is really critical. So let us get into the practical part. Let us talk about the 5 beverages that you can actually drink to unburden your liver by burning away harmful excess body fat. Beverage number 1, green tea. Here it is again, the ubiquitous green tea when it comes to health, and the question is, what is actually in green tea that is so good for you? Well, it has got a polyphenol, which is a type of plant antioxidant, and specifically a catechin chemical called EGG, which stands for epigallocatechin gallate, and we will just call it EGG for short, alright. And you know what EGG does? It does a lot of different things, okay, but in the case of burning down fat, it activates brown fat thermogenesis. So let me explain exactly what this means. Green tea activates brown fat thermogenesis, and brown fat is a really special kind of fat in your body. Honestly, it is good fat. It is not the wiggly jiggly kind. It is not the fat that bulges under your arms. It is not the fat that piles up under your chin. It is not your muffin top. Brown fat is way thinner, and it is plastered around the back of your neck, a little bit behind your breastbone, between your shoulder blades, and a little bit deeper in your belly. And when brown fat is activated, and green tea will activate it because the egg will switch on the brown fat, what that does is it fires up brown fat, kind of like a space heater, alright, and when it fires up a space heater, it is going to require energy to create that heat. Thermogenesis means creating heat, alright, and in order to create that heat, that energy the brown fat uses has to come from somewhere, and it is drawn directly from your excess body fat, like visceral fat from right inside your abdominal cavity, alright. So this is actually a way to switch on your good fat to burn down your bad fat, and it is a way of actually lowering the overall excess harmful body fat in your body. Green tea can actually do this. And another analogy that I often give for what brown fat does with thermogenesis is, if you have a stove in your kitchen, right, a gas range, what do you do when you want to heat up a pot of water or cook some soup? You walk over to the range, you turn on the dial, and you listen to it go click 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 whoosh, right? That is exactly what happens, and now you can put the pot on and boil it. Now when you go click 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 whoosh, you are actually drawing fuel gas from your gas line, maybe a gas tank by the side of your house, or maybe town gas, into that burner, and then when you ignite it, whoosh, now you have got that flame, and that flame is heating up the pot. That is exactly like what brown fat actually does, and while it is burning down the fuel directly from your excess white fat, okay, so that is bad fat being burned by good fat. Green tea can actually kick off that process in your body. Now how do we actually know that this works in real people? Well, this has been studied in the laboratory, where green tea and egg can actually have that effect on brown fat when you study it under the microscope in the lab, but more importantly, it works in actual clinical practice. It works in real people. So studies in Iran have looked at specifically 70 women who were coming from a diabetes clinic and who had metabolic syndrome. Alright, now this is kind of the early warning stage on your way towards type 2 diabetes and all the other badness that comes with excess body fat and problems with your metabolism. So what are the classic signs? You have metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, high lipids, high fasting blood sugar, and a large waist circumference. And waist circumference is actually a simple marker of how much body fat you actually have inside the tube of your body. So everyone, whether you are a big person or a skinny person, your body in cross-section is a tube, and there is fat that grows in the middle of that tube. So what happens when your visceral fat, the fat that sits inside the viscera of your gut, starts to expand? It is going to stretch out your tube, and if you imagine a belt wrapped around your tube of a body at normal waist size, when you get excess body fat and build up that visceral fat, you are going to undo a couple of belt holes in order to be able to buckle your belt, right? So that is exactly why waist circumference is a surrogate marker, a quick measurement of how much body fat, harmful body fat, excess body fat you might actually be carrying. So this study in Iran looked at those 70 women who were in a diabetic clinic with metabolic syndrome, and they gave the women just 7 ounces of green tea to drink. That is just under a full fluid cup of green tea, not very much at all in fact, and they gave it to them to drink 3 times a day for a full 8 weeks, alright. And there was another placebo group that just got lukewarm water to drink instead. The tea drinkers basically drank their cup of tea at breakfast, at lunch, and in the afternoon, and at the very end of those 8 weeks the tea drinkers lost 2 pounds of body weight, and they also shrank their waist circumference by almost an inch, which means that visceral fat had been burned down. Click 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 whoosh. Green tea activates the brown fat. The brown fat burns down the fuel, burns away the harmful fat. And guess what? Your waist circumference shrinks, and that is what you are looking at when you are losing excess body fat. This is the kind of thing that you can actually use to unpack your liver and unburden it from the body fat stored inside it. Now, in this same study, the women who had been drinking the green tea also had lower blood pressure, they had better fasting glucose, which is a great sign of metabolic health, and they actually had better blood lipids as well, meaning better blood cholesterol numbers. Now these are all really helpful signs that you are losing excess body fat and gaining a better overall metabolism, alright, and this is going to be really helpful if you are battling with a fatty liver and you want to actually turn things around. This is the kind of thing you want to do to start losing some excess body fat. Now there was a similar study from Tehran University of Medical Sciences. They looked at a different group of 63 men and women, and these people, by the way, were between the ages of 35 and 65, so basically adults all the way up through middle age, and they were overweight, and these people had frank type 2 diabetes, so they had already crossed the line into the diagnosis. And the study found that if they gave these people 4 cups of green tea per day over a 2-month period, okay, what happened is they lost 3 pounds of body weight, okay, but they also lost almost 2 full inches of their waist circumference, so they essentially shrunk like by 2 bell holes in their belt. Usually those bell holes are about an inch apart, right? So remember that waist circumference stretches out with excess body fat, and it shrinks back when you get rid of that visceral fat. Now these tea studies were not specifically done in people who had fatty liver, but the principles are absolutely the same. If you have fatty liver, you have got way too much fat inside your body. You can burn it off by eating less, by exercising, by staying in motion. You can also drink a little bit less sugary stuff, but if you want a little extra help from beverages, green tea is one of those drinks that can actually help you burn down all that harmful body fat, okay? And by the way, such as green tea, turns out if you are a real tea lover, and most people do like green tea, but if you want to try other teas that are also equally effective, here is some really good news for you. It turns out that you can improve your metabolism and burn down harmful body fat with matcha tea. That is the kind of bright green tea that you would actually get at a sushi bar, for example. And by the way, matcha is an exceptional tea because while regular green tea is more like the tea leaves steeped, so you take the whole leaves, you put them in a bag, or you put a loose leaf into hot water, and all the good stuff like the polyphenol and the eggs gradually dissolve out of the tea leaf into the water. With matcha, you take the entire leaf and grind it into a fine powder and stir that powder directly into your hot water, so you get the entire leaf, you get all of the egg, all of the polyphenol, and you also get all of the dietary fiber as well, which is good for gut health and good for metabolic health and helps you burn fat too. So matcha is another tea that has been shown to be a fat burner. Oolong tea is another tea that works here. Alright, if you know what oolong tea is, you are probably nodding your head right now and saying, hey, you know, that is actually my favorite. Oolong tea is the kind of tea that you will often get in a Chinese restaurant. It is not bright green and grassy like a green tea, but it also is not fully oxidized the way a black tea is. It sits in between, partly oxidized, so it has a more rounded flavor, but it also still has plenty of egg, the catechin that actually helps you burn off extra body fat. Now if you want to go dark and reach for a fully fermented tea, that is fine too. English breakfast tea, Earl Grey, all of those are good choices, but if you really want to take it to the absolute limit, there is a unique black tea called Pu or TPU with an apostrophe. Pu is a small city in southwest China that originally developed this smoky fermented tea, and it is a fermented tea, meaning it has got its own healthy probiotic bacteria growing inside the brick, and it is dried for a very long period of time, and historically it was originally used along a long trading route, so you know these compact little bricks of fermented tea could travel long distances without spoiling. Alright, well, it turns out researchers have found that Pu or tea can actually shrink your waistline as well. It has got the egg, it has got the usual catechin content, but it is also a probiotic tea that can also improve your overall metabolism. So although I have focused most of the talk on green tea, we also talked about matcha and oolong and Pu or tea, and I am telling you, black teas like English breakfast tea and Earl Grey are also really good. So here is a pro tip, though: if you are going to drink any of these teas, drink it straight and do not put sugar in it. Alright, sugar is just extra carbs and extra calories that you do not need right now because you're trying to burn down harmful body fat. Let that tea by itself do its own natural job. The other thing is that you know some people actually like to put dairy in their tea, like a splash of milk. If you want to cut your tea with a little bit of milk, please do not use dairy milk, and the reason is dairy from cows contains dairy fat, and that dairy fat forms little soap bubbles that actually bind up the polyphenol of the tea, and then when you drink it, the little soap bubbles that contain those polyphenol just sort of trickle down through your gut, and you have not really absorbed them all that well. So drink your tea straight if you can, alright, and if you do want to cut it with something, cut it with a nut milk instead. Almond milk is fine, soy milk is fine, oat milk is fine too. They do not actually form those problematic soap bubbles, so the polyphenol are still free to be absorbed. Beverage number 2, coffee, my personal favorite. Alright, now coffee has been studied a lot for metabolism, and it is definitely helpful for metabolism, and it definitely burns body fat, and the way that coffee does this is that it activates brown fat thermogenesis, just like green tea does. So coffee with chlorogenic acid, which is one of its key bioactive compounds, activates your brown fat, and brown fat is that useful fat that sits around the side of your neck, behind your breastbone, a little bit between your shoulder blades, and a little bit deep in your belly, and coffee fires it up, click 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 whoosh, and then your brown fat begins generating heat, and it is stealing the energy to power itself with fuel from somewhere, and it is stealing directly from your visceral fat, your harmful unwanted fat. So activated brown fat burns down that harmful unwanted fat and unburdens your body of extra fat, and that is Really good if you are really trying to counter a fatty liver. Now the other really cool thing about coffee and chlorogenic acid is that it actually prompts your body to make even more brown fat, so it is like putting more gas burners on your stove, alright, and now it is not just one burner, click 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 whoosh, you want 6 burners, you want 8 burners, and coffee will actually give your body lots of new burners to be able to draw more fuel, and in fact there have been clinical studies that show that this actually works. In fact, one particular study involved 504 people, and they were all coming from Indonesia, and it showed that regular coffee drinkers actually had measurably less body fat. And by the way, although caffeine itself can stimulate your metabolism as well, in this study from Indonesia the researchers were actually able to remove the caffeine from the coffee, and they found that even without the caffeine, the coffee's chlorogenic acid would fire up your brown fat and actually cause you to lose weight. Another study that came out of the Harvard School of Public Health along with collaborators from Singapore and Switzerland actually looked at something else really interesting. They took 26 men and women between the ages of 35 or 36 all the way up to 69. These people were overweight and they had clear insulin resistance, right? So they were on their way to actually developing type 2 diabetes, and half of the volunteers in the group were given 4 cups of coffee per day, 4 cups of coffee, and honestly I probably drink right around 4 cups of coffee a day myself. Alright, the type of coffee they made was brewed from Robusta beans, and they drank those 4 cups of coffee every day for 6 full months. I can tell you, if you had a kitchen camera on me, I would be drinking at least that for many more months beyond just 6 months. And the other half of the group that they were actually researching got a placebo beverage that looked and tasted like coffee, but it had no real coffee in it, no caffeine, no chlorogenic acid, nothing, and the coffee drinkers had their brew at breakfast, at mid-morning, then again at lunch, and also once after lunch. Alright, that was when they drank their 4 cups of coffee, and at the end of the study what they found was that the coffee drinkers lost 4.6 pounds, they lost 4.6 pounds of body fat. They actually lost real body fat. By contrast, the placebo drinkers actually gained body fat, they actually gained a bit of weight. Alright, so the two groups completely went in opposite directions. This really shows you that coffee has a real measurable effect on helping your body burn down extra body fat. Click 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 whoosh. Beverage number 3, tomato juice. Now listen, I love tomatoes, and when I was a kid I actually remember drinking tomato juice all the time. You remember that whole vegetable juice V8 brand? It is like a vegetable cocktail, and every now and then I will think about something like a Bloody Mary mix, right? Tomato juice is at the heart of it. Now tomatoes and their juice contains something called lycopene, and lycopene is a bioactive, it is a natural plant chemical, and it is a carotenoid, which means it helps to make tomatoes and other foods that rich red color, and tomatoes with their lycopene content have actually been shown to activate your, you guessed it, brown fat thermogenesis. Alright, so just like the previous 2 drinks, you can trigger on brown fat thermogenesis and burn down extra brown fat. In fact, there was a study from Portugal that gave just 1 ripe tomato to a bunch of young women in grad school to eat every day right before lunch for about 30 days, and guess what they found? Nothing else was changed in their diets, just giving them that 1 tomato would cause them to lose body fat, and they would specifically lose visceral fat, meaning their waist size would actually shrink a little bit, and all of their metabolic parameters would improve. So just like all the other foods I have talked about, the beverages, green tea, coffee, and now tomato juice will actually do the same job with the lycopene from tomatoes. Now research out of China has looked at 25 women who were normal weight, and what they did is they gave them just 1.2 cups of tomato juice, which is basically 1 1/5 cups of tomato juice to drink every single day for 8 weeks straight, right? So think about this. As a breakfast, tomato juice 1 cup is just a little bit more than a cup, and it is not very much at all. And at the end of the study, guess what they found? These women actually lost weight, and they also shrank their waist circumference. And when these researchers went on to look at the blood work of the tomato juice drinkers, they actually found that there was also a measurable decrease in the inflammatory marker, which in this case is called MCP. 1M is in Michael, C is in Charlie, P is in Peter. 1 MCP1, and its level went down in the blood, and that is an inflammatory marker. And by the way, excess body fat is itself inflammatory, driving higher levels of these markers around your body. So this is another example where body fat went down, and you could measure it in weight, you could measure it in waist circumference, and you could also measure it in the inflammatory marker associated with fat as well, and all of that was triggered by just a little bit more than a cup a day of tomato juice. Alright, now if you are going to go out and buy commercial tomato juice, just please look at the label on the back or the side and make sure that there are not preservatives or added flavorings or food colorings that you do not want to have in your body. Alright, you are going to want to have pure tomato juice with nothing else added, or you can even learn how to make it fresh yourself, which is actually really easy. And by the way, we are talking about beverages here, but you can probably guess that since this works with tomato juice, tomato sauce is also probably going to be a great way to integrate the same lycopene into your daily diet. So be practical here. You might not want to drink tomato juice every single day, so then go for tomato sauce on your pasta or on your vegetables, and you will still get most of that benefit. Alright, okay, beverage number 4 related to tomatoes is watermelon juice. Now you are probably thinking, wait a minute, Dr. Anthony Fauci, watermelons and tomatoes, nothing alike. They look nothing alike. You are right, they look completely different except for one crucial thing, and that is that both tomatoes and watermelons contain lycopene. That is right, the watermelon, which has that bright red flesh. Remember, I told you that lycopene is what helps to provide that red color. Well, watermelon actually has lycopene too. It has also got a lot of fluid in it, which is great for hydration, but it has also got plenty of lycopene. In there a lot of people do not actually know this, but watermelons were originally not the sweet red fruits that we enjoy today. They actually came from Africa originally, but they were not originally red, they were originally yellow, and they were not sweet either. They were just used as a source of water for hydration and cooling in that hot environment, but over many years they got bred selectively to become red and sweet, and that red color actually brought along with it the lycopene that we just talked about. Now researchers have been looking at watermelon juice. And here's what they found. They found that homemade watermelon juice, which means you get yourself a fresh watermelon, you cut it up, you chunk it into a blender, okay, and you puree it in the blender, can yield about 3.5 cups of juice that way. And these researchers had the volunteers drink about 3.5 cups of juice. Alright, that is a pretty sizable amount of juice, that is more than a tall glass really, but they found that drinking that much watermelon juice for just 3 weeks was enough to double the amount of lycopene, that fat-fighting substance circulating in your blood, because it is in your blood that lycopene actually goes to work. Alright, so watermelon juice is actually a really good way to get more lycopene into your body, and you can rotate your sources, have some tomato juice for breakfast, and then have some watermelon juice for lunch or in the afternoon, or pack some watermelon juice if you are going to go out, if you are at the beach, or if you are heading out for a long hike. Drink some watermelon juice before you leave, and you know why? Because watermelon juice has powerful antioxidant properties, and if you are going to go out into the sun, if you have a glass of watermelon juice a couple of hours before you go out in the sun, it will actually help to protect your DNA from the damage caused by ultraviolet radiation you encounter at the beach. Alright, so here is a simple plan. Just have some. You want to hydrate anyway, so hydrate with fresh watermelon juice instead of plain water. This is a really good thing to prepare if you are going to go out to the beach and you want to pack something refreshing. And again, if you are going to buy commercial store-bought watermelon juice, please look at the label, because most commercial watermelon juices on the market today have a lot of other things mixed in besides just watermelon juice. They often have just a bit of real watermelon juice, but they also have sometimes artificial coloring, sometimes added sugar, sometimes chemical preservatives, and sometimes other cheaper juices blended in. You really want to go for the pure one, so make it yourself. If you want to pick up a fresh watermelon next time you are at the grocery store, and keep it on your counter, and then when you are actually ready to make the juice, it is sitting right there ready to chunk up. Alright, by the way, the other thing about watermelons and watermelon juice that is healthy for you, and this is kind of like an extra credit benefit, is that watermelon flesh has something called citrulline, and citrulline is an amino acid. Your body uses it to make a really important substance called nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is absolutely critical for your cardiovascular health, and the more citrulline you take in, the more nitric oxide your body is going to produce. Let me tell you what nitric oxide does. It causes your blood vessels to dilate and relax, which means your blood pressure is going to go down as a result. And the other thing that nitric oxide does is it actually helps to maintain the lining inside your blood vessels. So think about it, the inside of your blood vessels, your circulation is around 60,000 miles of blood vessels running through your body, and they all respond directly to nitric oxide. The nitric oxide will actually call up stem cells that patrol along the inside of your blood vessels, and anywhere they find a pothole or a damaged spot in the lining, they will actually go in and replace it. So nitric oxide actively regenerates your blood vessels, and it is a regenerative substance, so watermelon juice containing citrulline can actually give you that cardiovascular benefit as well, and that benefit is in addition to the fat-burning lycopene in the juice. Hello there, just a quick note, I have another free resource. I want to share with you 5 of my favorite Mediterranean foods to fight fat. Listen, I do not personally follow any special diet, but I do follow a food approach. I call it the Mediterranean way because it brings together the healthiest cuisines from 2 parts of the world where people live really long and well, the Mediterranean and Asia, and I put together a list of 5 specific foods that you can add to your plate Mediterranean style so you can optimize your metabolism and fight harmful body fat. Download it for free right now from the description below. Now back to the video again. Make it yourself if you're going to buy it store-bought. Just be really careful, because most of the watermelon juice that I have ever seen in a grocery store is actually packed in plastic, and now you have microplastics to worry about on top of everything else, and it has got a whole lot more than watermelon juice inside it. It has got added sugar and other things, and you want to avoid all of that if you are trying to unburden your liver from stored fat. Alright, so now the 5th and final beverage on the list is plain drinking water. Alright, drinking water is the most popular beverage in the entire world. Number 2 is tea, and number 3, I think, is coffee. Alright, and clinical studies have taken a detailed look at what happens when you drink water, and it turns out to do more than just hydrate you. Like, water is obviously good for hydration, alright, but it turns out that if you actually drink water, a couple of really interesting things happen. First, it stretches your stomach out when you drink water right before a meal, and when your stomach gets physically stretched out, it sends a satiety signal up to your brain. Hey, you know, we are starting to feel filled up in here, so do not get too hungry, and that can actually blunt your appetite just by drinking water right before a meal, and that actually means fewer calories will end up going into your body. Alright, so drinking water can provide that very real benefit. The other thing that is really interesting is that drinking cold water triggers thermogenesis inside of you. Now, this has been well studied, and we believe that the Reason it works is that there are temperature sensors that live in the lining of our stomach, so you drink water glug 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 and the cold water goes down into your stomach, and there it sits, and guess what, that water is usually cool or even cold. It activates those temperature sensors in your stomach, and all of a sudden your body responds, whoa, near my core, I just got cold water, I have to fire up and heat it up because I do not want to drop my core temperature too low. What does that firing up actually translate into? Thermogenesis, alright, and so researchers in Germany have looked very specifically at this. They actually found that drinking just 2 cups of regular water was enough to cause an increase in your resting metabolism by a full 30%. That is a 30% increase in metabolism. You are actually burning down fat. You are actually firing up your thermogenesis. Brown fat fights white fat, good fat fights bad fat. You are burning down white fat, and now you are actually in better metabolic shape, and that all comes from this is just drinking water, alright, just trying to warm your body back up to its normal core temperature, plus the stomach stretching effect so that you feel fuller and will be less tempted to overeat. Remember, the number one cause of fatty liver in this country is actually overconsumption of calories, so this is one really easy way that plain water actually helps to circumvent that cycle and counter that trend. So now this whole thing about drinking cold water and your body having to heat it up to reach body temperature in order to not freeze your core temperature. Scientists have actually calculated this for us. If you drank 6 cups of water every single day for an entire year, 6 cups of water every day for a whole year, you would burn approximately 17,400 calories just from warming up that water alone, alright, and that calorie burn is the energy equivalent of burning off 5 pounds of body fat. That is what we are genuinely talking about here, and that is just from the thermogenic effect of warming up the water. Water also fills you up, so you are less likely to overeat in the first place, and then on top of all of that, it actually requires real energy and real fuel from your stored body fat in order to be able to warm that cold water up as it travels through your body. Now the other thing about water that matters if you are actually dealing with a fatty liver and you want to really watch out for dehydration is that you need to stay well hydrated. Remember that I told you that the liver's main role, its big role, is to actually detoxify your body, and if you have liver problems or liver failure, or you have developed fatty liver and you become dehydrated, alright, now you are dehydrated and all of those toxins that are not getting purified inside your body are becoming more concentrated in your blood. Now those toxins have to run through the liver on every circulation, and you know that is going to be even more painful and damaging for your overall health. So staying well hydrated dilutes out everything inside your blood, okay, in terms of toxins, and it is actually a better and easier and smarter thing to have in your routine when you actually have fatty liver. In fact, that is just something that you should be doing anyway, which is consistent hydration. But if you have got a fatty liver, you definitely want to actually drink water on a regular schedule to prevent dehydration, alright. Here is one more thing that I got to tell you as a final pro tip. If you are getting water from a store, most likely you are buying plastic water bottles, right? You are going to go for a hike. What are you going to do? You are going to grab a 6-pack of bottled water. You are on an airplane. What are they handing you? They are handing you a bottle of plastic water in a plastic bottle. You go to a sporting event. You are running a marathon. What do the people on the sidelines hand you? They hand you a bottle of water, usually inside a plastic bottle, right? Like we are so used to bottled water that we do not even give it a second thought. So is bottled water a great source to get your water in? No. And I am going to tell you exactly why, because we now know that bottled water almost always will have microplastic particles floating around in it. You know why? Because the plastic from the bottle, including any reused or recycled plastic, it is slowly shedding particles straight into the water, like literally billions of tiny particles into that bottle of water. You cannot see them, but they are absolutely there. You drink the water, and now you are drinking plastic into your body. Alright, we now know that it is very hard to avoid plastic entirely. But we now also know that if you analyze human blood, you can actually find plastic particles there. If you look inside heart tissue, if you look at blood vessel walls, if you examine blood clots, if you dissect the narrowing of atherosclerotic arteries, the plaques inside the arteries, and look under the microscope, you will find microplastics that have accumulated inside those plaques. They have even found microplastics embedded deep inside men's testicles. Okay, that is not a good thing at all, and these particles are invisible to you. There are microplastics and even smaller particles which are called nanoplastics, and we did not used to worry too much about them. In fact, I would say even just a year or so ago, I would have told you we do not have enough evidence yet to know whether microplastics are actually harmful, so it is probably going to be fine, but you should still cut down your use of plastic. But now more recent data clearly shows us that microplastics are definitely harmful. In fact, a study from Italy specifically looked at men who were already in the hospital having to undergo surgery to remove dangerous blockages from their carotid arteries, the neck arteries, right? And when those researchers looked at the removed blockages under the microscope, guess what? In those fatty deposits they found actual pieces of plastic. You can look this up on the internet yourself. Just look for atherosclerotic plaque microplastics and then hit image search, and you will actually see the electron microscope pictures showing the plastic particles studding that plaque, and they look kind of like tiny bits of litter that you might see on a dirty beach, except that this litter is inside your own body and stuck to the wall of your blood vessels. Now what the study from Italy actually showed statistically is that people with plastic pieces studding their vessel blockages had a fourfold increase in having a heart attack or a stroke compared to people whose plaques did not have those plastic particles. So this is no joking matter anymore. We are actually beginning to take a look at real measurable harms that you do not want to actually have happen to you. So when you are going to drink water, get it stored in a glass bottle or a glass container and avoid plastic water bottles as much as you possibly can. It is also better for the environment not to use plastic water bottles because you have to throw them away and they go into landfills or they end up in the ocean. We already have plastic pollution absolutely everywhere, and now we are even finding plastic particles in the air that we breathe, so use less plastic in your daily life on purpose. The other thing is that if you are storing water or carrying water with you, let us say you have well water at home, and you are going to load up a bottle to take with you, think about it, those water containers that you might have looked for a thermos or a jug that is built with a metal core in the middle of it and not plastic on the inside. Think about those plastic sports water bottles that you might have for your bike rides. You might take them running with you or take them out hiking with you. Guess what? You are going to be putting those plastic bottles in the dishwasher over and over again, and when the dishwasher and the hot water wears down the inner plastic lining, what do you think happens? The plastic slowly crumbles and sheds into the water you are drinking, and then you are drinking it and you cannot see the plastic. It is invisible. This is a really big problem. Alright, so I'm going to say it again. Drinking water is genuinely great for helping you lose excess body fat among the many beverages we have talked about today, but if you are going to have water, make sure to not get it in a plastic bottle and avoid plastic contact with your drinking water for your health, no matter what it takes in order to be able to do that. Now some people will say, okay, Dr. Anthony Fauci, how much water should I really drink? Should I really drink 10 tall glasses of water a day? Like, is that what my Boy Scout troop told me, or what my mother told me, or what my teacher told me? Well, look, this is actually what happens with all of these generalizations, like drink 10 tall glasses of water a day. There is no fixed universal rule of thumb. Research has shown that not everybody actually needs to drink 10 tall glasses of water every single day. You should drink liquid every single day, and that liquid should mostly be water, alright, but it is not necessarily exactly 10 glasses for everyone. It all depends on your personal context. If you are a larger, bigger person, you might need more water to be able to properly hydrate all of your tissues. If you are a smaller or thinner person, you might not need quite as much water. If you are at home working on your computer, you might not be losing too much water through sweat, and you probably will not need quite as much water, maybe not 10 full glasses. But if you are out working in the garden all afternoon, or you are hiking up a mountain somewhere, or you are training for a marathon, or you are going to the gym and working out hard, or you are swimming laps in the pool, okay, then you are definitely going to need more water. In fact, you might easily need more than 10 cups of water in those active situations. So the best way to think about how much water you actually need to have is to be in close touch with your own body and to feel how much you feel you actually need, and this body awareness is something that medical researchers call interoception. So just feel like, okay, do I actually need to drink some water right now? And simply pay attention to your body's signals. If you feel like you are thirsty and your body is telling you it needs water, then go ahead and drink some water, okay? Sip it slowly, do not chug it all at once. Chugging it all down in one go is kind of like what you would do if you have been lost in a desert and desperately needed water. Sip it instead in order to be able to actually let your body equilibrate to it comfortably. Take your time with it, but make sure you actually satisfy your thirst, because that is genuinely the best and most natural way to know exactly how much water you should drink. Right now we have been talking about losing body fat and the specific beverages that can actually be really helpful, but here is the thing. In the context of fatty liver, I need you to truly understand what I said at the very beginning of this video. Your liver is a critical organ for detoxifying your blood every single day. When you have got a fatty liver, you are pretty far down the road in terms of having a serious health impairment, and the good news is that you can actually do things like drink the specific beverages we have talked about today to be able to unpack the fat out of your body, and your liver will actually start to recover and regenerate, and that is actually something you can actively do for yourself. But if you have a fatty liver, you absolutely need to be working closely with your own doctor in order to be able to actually deal with it properly, because fatty liver disease is a serious medical problem. Alright, it is not a home remedy type of issue. The things we have talked about today, the specific things you can drink, and I am actually going to do another YouTube video soon talking about specific foods you can also eat to unpack the fat from a fatty liver. But the things we have talked about today are all really useful things that you can do for yourself, the healthcare and the daily habits you can practice right at home, but you are still going to need to be under the proper supervision and the proper guidance of a qualified medical doctor who is probably going to refer you to a specialist in order to help you achieve the best possible outcome if you have a fatty liver, and this absolutely requires professional medical help. So please do not try to handle fatty liver entirely on your own. I really hope you learned something valuable from this video today, and thank you so much for watching. Dr. Anthony Fauci out. Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you are going to love the next one. Stay right here and check it out, and I will see you there.